But also the thing about that infuriated me the most.
Welcome back to Straight Up Book Club. We're talking about Sally Rooney's Intermezzo, the second half. So that's part 2 and part 3 of this book. Yeah, I flew through this book. I think I read it in like 3 days, these two parts. But yeah, tell us what's happened, Heather. Wait. I had two sips of my mimosa. Before we do, tell me about your week.
I'm so excited to talk about it because it was so good. It was beautiful.
It was.
You want me to go first? My week? My week was really busy. I feel like it was all a blur. I'm very tired. Nat and I were just talking about how tired we both feel we look, but I feel like, is it because you feel, I don't think you look tired, but do you feel tired?
I feel tired, yeah.
Okay. I'm feeling it too. It's just been one of those weeks. What did happen? I don't know. I've still been like coming off of being sick, but I did go see an author talk actually on Wednesday night, and it was Ruman Alam, who wrote
Ooh.
Leave the World Behind.
I love that book and that movie.
Obsessed. He most recently wrote a book called Entitlement, which I bought, so I'll be reading that soon. But he was interviewed by Ashley Audran. We talk about her a lot. We really like her books, so it was a lot of fun to see the two of them together. But it was so funny because at the very beginning, I like showed up a little early, which is crazy for me. I never show up early, and so I was like, it was a solo date for me, and I took out my book, my Sally Rooney book, and was reading that. But when I'm reading, like I did this for y'all, like I don't keep the cover on just because it gets in the way. Like I just read it like this. And as I'm reading it, a woman comes and sits down next to me and starts talking to a woman in front of her that she knew about this book. And she was saying what we were saying last time, which is that she couldn't get into it. She's like, I love Sally Rooney. I feel really bad. And her friend goes, yes, that's what it's like at the start, but promise me you'll keep going because it gets so good. Like, you'll get into it. I promise you. It's one of her best works yet. And she's like, okay, I'm just going to put a timer on. And I wanted so badly to be like, I'm reading that book right now and I feel the same way. But I was like, that's weird. Like, don't be that person. So I just like awkwardly was reading and I could feel my face getting like really hot because I was almost like embarrassed that I was like reading the thing that they were talking about, but they had no idea. Like, they probably didn't even see me even though she was right next to me. But anyways, I just thought that was like really interesting and fun, and Eavesdropping is like my favorite thing ever. And then it's hilarious because then he got on stage, the Ruman Alam, and he talked about how like as a writer his favorite thing to do is eavesdrop on people, and he's like, it's the most like satisfying thing ever. And I felt very justified in totally listening in on this conversation, and I wanted so badly to interject, but it's like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And it was at the beginning, so I would have had to like sit through the whole thing with him next to me. So that was great.
That's fair.
Yeah,
and
it was fun.
It's always like, whenever I'm in those situations too, it's like, I totally get what you mean about your face feeling hot, because I feel that. Like, I felt that so viscerally as you were saying it. Because it's like, you want to participate. You want to have this like human connection, but at the same time, you're like, well, do you want to talk to me, or you're going to be like, oh, the stranger, why are they talking to me, you know?
A part of me is like, we should just normalize interjecting if it's something that we agree with. Like, I was thinking about it in like the shower the next day. I'm like, should that just be something normal? Or if it's like, if I agree with what you're saying and I'm eavesdropping, should it be welcomed? And then same goes with other people. But then a part of me is like, would that get rid of the magic of eavesdropping? Like, if we normalized it, like, there's something very like secretive about just kind of like listening in and like, I don't know, taking what they are saying and then using that as fodder for conversations later on. Like this is case in point. Like, I'm using this as an example. Who knows what would have unfolded if I had like spoken up, but it wasn't my place. It wasn't my night. These were two friends together and I was reading the book and the coincidence was happening, but it felt like magic to me and my cheeks were burning because I was like, oh my God. Anyways, Nat, how was your week?
Well, before I get into that, this just reminded me of, like, if I was in your place, sometimes I do interject, especially if I'm by myself. I just, like, have those moments where I'm like, I just want connections. I just will. And this just reminded me.
I didn't know that about you. Sorry, I don't know why I'm so surprised, but I love that. Okay, keep going.
I can be extroverted, Heather. I have my moments, especially if I'm by myself. But yeah, I remember being in a Pilates class and the Pilates instructor was just like making conversation with one of the people who was in that class. And I was like, it's the instructor. Like, I don't know if they're friends or not. Like, it probably seems like a situation that might be sort of as familiar to each other as I am to them. So I'm like, I'm just going to make up conversation. It was hands down one of the most awkward moments in my life because they were talking about the movies, and one of them had just gone to see a movie. I can't remember which one. And our tastes in movies were so different. I had just gone to see, was it Poor Thing? The one with like, I'm forgetting, Willem Dafoe. And Emma Stone, yeah. And I love that movie. And it was still in theaters, and I was like talking it up, and everyone's like, oh, like, I just can't with that director. Like, I watched The Lobster. I hated that movie. And I was like, okay, I hadn't watched The Lobster yet, but I did watch The Lobster much after this conversation. Love it. So,
such a good movie. Killing of a Sacred Deer, amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm Team Nat here. They didn't know what they were doing.
So I was like, all right, like I shot myself in the foot there. Maybe shouldn't have started that conversation. But you win some, you lose some.
I feel like I lose them all anytime I try. So it just comes out awkward and weird. And like the older you get, like the more awkward and weird it is. Like I feel like when I was like 20, I could get away with the like, oh, it's just awkward. And now I'm like, I'm in my 30s. Like, why am I this awkward lady trying to talk about your dog on the elevator? Like or like the pizza that you bought. Like, they don't care. They want to go home and eat their pizza. I don't know. It's hard. I can't even remember the last time I interjected. That is where you're more extroverted than me for sure. I feel like you are more extroverted than me.
It depends. It depends. I think it's like, I don't know. I have my moments, and then in large crowds I shut down sometimes. But
that's fair. Large crowds are hard.
Yeah. But my week was good. It was busy. It was Halloween. It was my first time, like, being in a place where trick-or-treaters actually stopped by, so that was really fun. Yeah, handed out candy.
Any great costumes that showed up?
I didn't see, well, I mean, there's only the two sets of kids that came by, so, yeah, there was some effort there, but really it was the houses, to be honest. Like, there's so much effort being put into people's houses on the street or just generally in the neighborhood. And I was like, I really need to step up our game. So next year, we're going to need to participate.
The street next to mine, like, closes down for Halloween. Like it shuts down for vehicle access. And I guess every house that wants to participate just, like, goes all out. And it's such a fun thing to just, like, walk through. All the adults are there with, like, their drinks, and the kids are kind of running around. And there's always this guy who's, like, dressed up as this, I don't know, like, some sort of monster. And in years past, he used to have, like, a chainsaw he'd go around with. And, like, it used to be, like, a legit chainsaw with just, like, the chains taken off. And every year, it would get, like, downgraded. And now he just runs around with a little plastic axe. And now the kids chase after him. Anyways, it's so fun. I just love Halloween. I love seeing all the costumes. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's a fun holiday to, like, observe. Because I don't really dress up. Like, I kind of just, like, leave my house and go for a walk and, like, take in all the dogs that are dressed up. Oh, my gosh. It kills me.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. It makes me want a dog. But, yeah, it's a fun holiday. That should be a holiday. I don't know why we don't have that day off, but.
Yeah, we should have the day off.
Okay. Shall we get into the book? All right.
Yeah, so tell us what's happened.
All right, a lot has happened. I need my notes. Do I need my notes? I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so a lot happens. Like, obviously, last time we left off with Peter and Ivan kind of having that disagreement, and Ivan storms off. But he ends up kind of happy, like, in a situation with Margaret. Part 2... and I guess part 3 as well, because I'll cover everything. Peter and Sylvia have, like, this fling one night, and he goes home, and breaks up with Naomi. He feels like he loves Sylvia. He sees them together, and he just like envisions this life and decides that like he doesn't want Naomi in it anymore. So he goes home and he breaks up with her, and she's like, do you want me to leave? And he's like, it's probably for the best, but like I know you don't have anywhere to stay. So he sends her to Kildare, which is the house that their father lived in before he passed away, and Ivan actually lived there as well. Ivan, on his side, goes to see the dog, Alexei, I think his name is, who is at his mom's. And, like, we know their mom, who they call Christine, keeps sending them text messages being like, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm done. And then one day she's like, okay, that's it. I'm finding a good home for him. And she sent a picture of the dog with, like, toilet paper, like a roll of toilet paper in his mouth. And then I guess, like, that was her thing where she was done with him. So Ivan goes to see how the dog is doing, sees that he's in this like utility room and he's like out of water. He's obviously like not taken care of. He freaks out and says like, I'm taking the dog with me. And he goes to Kildare because his apartment won't allow pets and he doesn't want to like ruin, you know, their lease because it's something that like could ruin the chance for him and his roommates. So he goes to Kildare where the dog can stay too, and that's when he runs into Naomi. And he finds out that this is Peter's, like, ex-girlfriend. And he doesn't know anything about her, but she knows everything about him. And that kind of angers him a little bit. He obviously sees the hypocrisy that you and I talked about last time, which is the fact that, like, Peter's dating this woman who's 10 years younger than him. Ivan's dating someone who's 10 years older than him. And Peter kind of judged him in that moment. So Ivan gets really upset about this. Peter shows up one night when she's gone. And him and Ivan get into a fight that actually gets really physical. I think, like, Ivan pushes him. He throws, like, a candlestick down on the ground. Peter ends up, like, slapping him. And it leaves, like, I think his lip gets caught in his braces. And he gets a bit of a cut there. Peter storms out, gets obliterated. Like, I think it was a night of, like, drugs and alcohol. And goes to stay with their mom for a night. And their mom's actually, like, quite sweet in that moment. She's like, oh, yes, my dear, like, come in. She takes care of him. But then when he wakes up the next day, she's gone. So he decides to go back home. And when he goes back home, that's when he's confronted by Naomi and Sylvia, who were worried about him and started looking for him. And they kind of met because Naomi, in looking for Peter, was like, well, maybe Sylvia will know where he is. She found her, like, professor's email online, reached out to her, so the two have kind of like joined forces. He says that his girlfriend's unionized, and you know, he, like, Sylvia leaves, him and Naomi get to talking, and Naomi's kind of like, you know, I do really love you, I love Sylvia, she's great, like, can't we make this work? Like, can't the three of us make this work? And Peter kind of thinks, you know, maybe it can. He's not really sure. He leaves and goes, he starts like, sorry, he doesn't leave. He starts looking into Ivan's chess matches because it turns out that he's playing competitively again. And he goes to one of these matches, and when he's there, that's when he meets Margaret. Margaret's kind of waiting outside. She doesn't want to, like, distract Ivan while he's in playing his match. And they start talking. She convinces him to, like, wait in this sort of foyer area when the match ends. She goes, gets Ivan, I guess tells him that Peter's out there. Ivan comes out, and the two of them have this, like, really emotional, beautiful, like, apology, this kind of come to Jesus, for a lack of a better term, and the two of them make up, and it's really beautiful, and that's essentially how the book ends.
Mm-hmm. That was a lot of stuff that happened in so many people. No, I think you got everything.
I forgot how much had happened, and then when I started, like, typing some of this down, I'm like, oh, wait, and then this happened, and this happened. It was, like, very sequential. It was, like, everything kind of added up to this perfect storm of, like, you know, Naomi being at the house in Kildare, and then Peter being there, and Ivan being there, and then them fighting, but then Peter coming home to Naomi and Sylvia, like, and then, you know, it was, like, everyone was where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to be there. If that makes sense. So
Yeah. And honestly, like, in the second and third parts, like, what really struck me or just, like, did a total 180 was Naomi for me. Like, in the beginning, she was such a like, almost like a sleeper character, you know, like, I feel like, you know, I wasn't paying attention to her as much. It was like, And I think like that was done really well, where she's like been so stoic this entire time. But now we notice like, I think it's early in part 2 where, you know, she's seeing Peter's actions just like very directly affect her and her life. There's this moment where she's like, she says, you know, it's my life too. But she's like saying it in a very like mechanical way. Like, this is like straight hard facts, you know, like I'm like the things you're doing affect me as well. But that kind of broke my heart a little bit, because like the way she was delivering it was like she has had, it sounds like, quite a bit of hardship in her life. She's had people not be good to her, and she feels in this situation that she's with someone who is being good to her, and I feel like she's sort of almost struggling with her like agency in this moment, where she's like, you know, I don't want to rock the boat in a way, but also I know this isn't right either. And that really struck me. And it was also such great character growth that like she comes back. Not only does she come back, but she like advocates for Peter, you know, in her conversation with Ivan. Yeah, so I feel like leaving this book, like she's one of my favorite characters. What do you think?
I love that she is your favorite character. There was something about her, I agree. At the beginning, she was almost like this too cool for school kind of figure, someone who is like probably out of Peter's reach, but you know, he has money, he's a bit older, so that's working in her favor. And the way it was painted, and obviously like this is through Peter's psyche, like it seems like she's using him. The self-awareness that she has at the end, where she's like, yeah, like she calls out Peter for like using her as like a distraction, I think, from, you know, his pain with Sylvia. And then he's like, you were using me too. And she goes, yeah, look, I was. And she's like, I wasn't innocent in this either. And I'm not saying that that's okay, but I also realize like she's kind of calling his game for game. Like she's like, I know what you were doing to me too, and none of it was okay. It's really interesting how these characters are portrayed when you're getting them from one brother's perspective to the other, because it's when Ivan meets her is when we start to see her as like, you know, she's asking questions about him. She knows about him. She's memorized things. There's a moment later in the book when Ivan's like, yeah, Naomi messaged me to wish me happy birthday. Like, she's a person who remembers things and cares. And it's like, that's not someone who's using another person. That's someone who genuinely cares about their well-being. The fact that she was worried about Peter that night and, you know, looked up Sylvia's email to get a hold of her and be like she is kind of the other woman. Like, they're both the other woman for each other. And even though they know about each other, and the fact that they kind of joined forces to figure out how to get a hold of him, they're like, oh, we were going to call your mom next. Like, they were already there, even if he hadn't have showed up at home. I agree. I did really love her character development a lot. I also really loved Sylvia's as well. And I loved all of the women in this book. It's so funny. This is very like much a book about like two men, but all of the women in their lives and how complex they all are. And Sylvia at the beginning feels like this almost like unfortunate woman, almost like a Lucky character from Blue Sisters, where it's like, it just seems like, oh, she was perfect. Yeah. And then she had this horrible tragedy happen to her, which is like sad, but it's also a little bit of a mechanism, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it creates a character that's easy to kind of cast aside, which works when the character's dead, and we don't need to go into that character much, but the people who are living through the grief of that person. But Sylvia's still alive in this, and she has her own agency, and I think that starts to come through in the moments also with Ivan. What did you think of Sylvia? I'm curious to know if you felt a similar kinship to her. I don't know if kinship is the right word, but similar feelings for her as you did Naomi.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you said about the characters being different in depending on the characters that they're conversing with, right? And I hadn't picked up on that. That's such a great observation. And for Sylvia too, right? Like then, you know, in her moments with Ivan, where she's like, I think in your notes you said something about the vacuous truth that they're discussing, you know, and she's like really having that conversation with him and getting him to like rethink some of his mindset. I I think I'm with you there. Like, she was such a like perfect character, you know, and this is sort of the thing that brought her down to a human level in a way, you know, the way she's portrayed. And there's an element of, you know, where you're sort of almost like pitting these women against each other, you know, and you can't, you know, in her case too. So that was also a weird tension. I'm not quite sure I have like an articulate thought there, but it's more just something I was feeling throughout, you know, where, you know, we're kind of like, there's almost like a moral judgment of these characters as well. And that's very stark between Sylvia and Naomi. The other thing for Sylvia is like, I really liked that she didn't want to be with Peter at the end there, because she needs to figure out who she is still, right? I know it's been like 6 years, but she's in the middle of this pretty difficult life transition, and it's taking a long time, and her body's sort of deteriorating over time. It sounds like it gets worse. I don't know. Did you pick up on that too, or is that just an impression I got? I don't know if it was ever released that or anything.
Yeah, I definitely get the sense that she has flare-ups. And then when the flare-ups happen, they're debilitating. And the most recent one seemed like it was probably the worst one. So I definitely get that as well.
I love that she wasn't like waiting for Peter to, you know, go away and be single and then realize he still wanted to be with her. I would be, you know, that would not jive with me. I'd be very annoyed with a character arc like that.
She had that really vulnerable moment. I can't remember if it was in the first part or the second, where she says, for you to like stay with me after this accident would have been so humiliating for me. And I feel like that is such a true thought for a woman to have in that situation. You know, there is a little bit of a humiliation behind, you know, if you're in a relationship with someone where a lot of that relationship is sexual, for that part to be taken away from forces that you didn't decide yourself. It wasn't an exterior thing that happened to you. There is something a little bit like, well, I don't want to be left behind by, like, you know, Peter even admits later on, he's like, yeah, maybe at a certain point I would have resented you for staying with you. And I think that, I don't know, I feel like her even like vocalizing the humiliation part was just so vulnerable. But really, she's so smart. Everything, like, I loved her intelligence. I think that was something. Naomi's intelligent as well. They both are very, very smart women, and I love how there was a few moments when Peter's thoughts, he remarks on like the intelligence he's seeing in Naomi's eyes. It's like every time she says something that I think he didn't expect intelligence from her, but he expected it from Sylvia. So every time it happens, he kind of takes note of it. Anyways, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but Sylvia's character was so interesting, because she just knew how to level with Peter. That moment you touched on it with like the vacuous truth. Like when they met up, she knew that him and Peter were fighting, and she didn't stop and go, hey, you and Peter are fighting. Like, how are you guys doing? She didn't meet with him at an emotional level, because she knows that that's not how he relates to people. She met with him on an intellectual level and gives him a riddle instead to solve on his own and to take back, which I just thought was such a like intelligent but also beautiful way to interact with people.
When Naomi's described as smart, it's almost like conniving. When right? Like when Sylvia is, it's more
sorry.
It's like there's thunder in your home. But yeah, when Sylvia is described as smart, it's like bookish in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Or like commanding. Yeah, the thing with Ivan, or in that moment, right? Like, okay, my brain is like, I want to talk about so many things, but like,
I know, that's why I keep tangenting too, because I'm like, oh shit, okay, go, don't forget anything. I need to know what's going through your mind.
Just one comment about Peter before, because I also really want to talk about Ivan and his sort of like things we find out about his character, right? And his like growth and like how he's not been the best. But anyway, Peter, there was this like, there was a good like 10, 15 pages where he was just waffling. Like, he could not make up his mind. Is it like Sylvia or is it Naomi? Do I like Sylvia? Do I love her? Do I like Naomi? Do I love her? Like, it was a lot. Honestly, I feel like those pages I kind of like skimmed through, like even especially at the end where, you know, he's like, oh, can I have this relationship with this throuple, essentially, right? Like, is this going to work? Like, it just goes on and on. I did not love that. What did you think about it?
Oh, no, I definitely skimmed those moments too. It's insufferable when people are like that, you know, when they like can't decide and they're going back and forth and you're like, oh my God, can you just decide? And I know that I do that with certain things 100%, and it's annoying. And like after you hear yourself for a while, you're like, wow, like I really just gotta make up my fucking mind here. And like, you know, you want to wring Peter's neck in that moment and like, just make up your mind. But also the thing about that infuriated me the most is that both of these women are like, we're down for this, like, you know, but both of these women are so open-minded. Like, Naomi's like, you love Sylvia, you love me, like, can't we make this work? He can have it all. So why is he flip-flopping? Like, what do you think? If Peter's being given this option to have both of the things that he wants, where do you think that mental block is coming from of him feeling like he has to decide?
Well, I think what you said about sort of it touches on social pressures, right? And I think Ivan brings this up too. Like, he just cannot let go what the world thinks of him, and it's just been so important to him, and he's held it so close that this really challenges that, you know. And even when Ivan's describing him, it's really like, you know, he has this like very like glamorous perception of Peter, and I think Peter's someone who thrives on that. You know, he wants the world to see him as having his life together, and this sort of doesn't reconcile with that for him. And I mean, I can see that, you know, if you are in a way, right? Like, isn't this something like Margaret's escaping too, you know, where everyone is so used to their like structured life or everything's defined, you know, everything has to be a certain way. And then, you know, if suddenly you don't fit in that little box anymore, you feel ostracized. And I think that's what Peter's afraid of. And I mean, just having this conversation with you now, it almost feels like, you know, we got a little bit of Peter's past as well, where he's sort of even struggled to connect with his parents and have them, you know, care about him on a deeper level. So, you know, I understand that maybe with that background, like, you might be in constant fear of, you know, other people also rejecting you in some of these ways that you've experienced, and maybe you're hyper vigilant because of that.
That's so true. I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Like, he could not connect with his father. Like, he felt othered by his father, so why would he try to find other ways to feel othered by the world? You're so right. Didn't that whole, like, Peter's upbringing through Ivan's lens, like, break your heart a little? Like,
yeah.
like when he's talking about, like, Peter always bringing home, like, the chessboard. And because, like, the parents have been like, you're not playing chess in the house, because, or his mom would do that because Christine had her new husband and her stepkids that she was enthralled with, and she didn't want Ivan playing chess because she thought that it was going to make the other kids feel bad because he was so good at it. And so he wasn't allowed to play. And then then Peter, every time he came home from college, he'd, like, bring the chessboard. He's like, all right, let's play. And Ivan was like, even though Peter wasn't that good or even really liked chess that much, it was important to him to have that experience with me, knowing that it was important to me. Like, Peter was so protective of Ivan, and there was that moment when Ivan comes downstairs, it's after Sylvia's accident, and Peter's, like, crying and he's distraught, and Ivan's angry with him because he doesn't like that Peter is being so emotional, and Ivan's like, I was just a kid. Like, I shouldn't have to, you know, be there for you. But I think there was so much almost like parentification from Peter, that Ivan expected him to be more of a parent to him, I think from the age gap as well, that he didn't expect that sibling relationship where when you're siblings, you have to look after each other. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it was, that part was heartbreaking, that Peter was just so alone in those moments.
Yeah, because there's this big traumatic life event that just happened. And it was also like the way that Ivan handled it, right? Like, yeah, I get he's a kid, but he just walks away. He doesn't say anything. It's never acknowledged again. Yeah. And, you know, from that point on, Peter doesn't even try to talk to him. What was interesting to me is that later on, Peter brings up, like, I had to be, you know, the parent figure for you and our father. Yeah. But they don't go into that very much. Like, did I miss that? Like, what was happening with his father? We didn't really understand why he was kind of not really there for them, you know?
No, it didn't go into detail, at least, like, because I remember looking for that too, and I was like, wait, what was going on? And I just guessed that maybe, like, maybe their dad was a lot like Ivan, where Ivan, like, you know, his empathy is very learned, like, it wasn't innate for him, and it took him a lot of time to get there. So I do wonder if maybe it was something like that, but no, they don't really talk about how he did have to parent their father, because from Ivan's perspective, from both their perspectives, like, their dad would never have allowed them to fight or, like, be upset with each other. So I didn't get the vibe that it was like an anger kind of thing. It might have been more of just maybe like an emotional barrier there. I'm not totally sure, but they didn't go into detail on that. It's a bit of a secret between them.
That's a good point. Yeah. And what you said about Ivan's empathy being learned is so interesting too, because we don't find out, right? Like, he's had these moments in his past where he's held these views about women that are pretty horrible, and Peter calls him out on that. And his response is, well, I learned and I grew and I know that I was wrong now. And that's really interesting too. Like, he acknowledges it, but also he's very, like, rational and matter of fact about it, you know? Like, some of these, and it's interesting because some of these things, you know, like, you just know, you know, Peter says, you know, objectively, you were wrong in that moment. And Ivan almost can't grasp that, you know, he can't wrap his head around that sort of objective, yeah, you're just wrong. Then strike a chord. It's like, yeah, sometimes it's, like, hard to get people to see that.
Yeah, I think Ivan really struggles with that. Like, and I think that's exactly why I think he's always been so fact-based up until this point. And then, yeah, that was an objective area. He almost gave, like, I don't know, like, Joe Rogan vibes, like, in, like, there was a little moment where they talk about the show or the YouTube videos that he'd watch, and I was like, oh, Ivan, like, I like you, Ivan, like, how dare you be that kind of person at some point. It's interesting that Margaret seems to be the person who teaches him this empathy, because it seems very recent, this new respect towards women, and, like, going back to what we talked about before, like, he even thought in, like, the first part about that moment with the woman on the subway who needed the seat, the pregnant woman who needed the seat. And he did think ill of her early on, and then it's only later on that he's like, oh, maybe that actually was, like, a bad way to think. Maybe I should have just given her that chair. So all of this is very recent learnings, and it's all coming from Margaret. It seems like Margaret has a lot of influence on Ivan. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the two of them? It's also interesting too, sorry, before I hand you the rest of that question, but it's interesting because at the end, when Ivan and Peter are making up, and it starts with, like, Peter running into Margaret, and I can't remember what Peter says, but she's like, I can't imagine you'd think very highly of me either. And Peter's kind of taken aback by that. He's like, oh, like, this woman feels a lot of, like, shame, I guess, for, I don't know, her life or whatever's happened in it. And then in the end, when Peter and Ivan are talking about it, Ivan's like, okay, I'm going to have Christmas in Kildare. You're welcome to join. And then he's like, you're welcome to bring whoever you want. And Peter kind of makes a joke about how, like, oh, I don't know how traditional that would be. Like, how would Margaret feel about that? He's like, no, Margaret will understand. And he said something like, I don't know. And he's like, no, literally, she understands everything. And I do think that from what we've seen is true. Like, she always understands Ivan, but then she always understands the other people that are, like, against him. She's always like, families are hard, they're complex, people are grieving. Like, she's always understanding of every single person. She's kind of like the epitome of empathy. She's like, yeah, Ivan, like, I totally empathize with you in this moment, but also I empathize with Peter, and I empathize with your dad or your mom. There is one point when one of her siblings, or she makes a comment, or someone makes a comment about the fact that, like, she's a martyr and she likes being a martyr, and she's like, yeah, I kind of do. I think I get off on being the person who, like, puts everyone else first. It wasn't those words exactly, but she alludes to that.
It's interesting. So I didn't remember the part about her being a martyr or saying that she was, but that's exactly what it is, right? Like, she's in a relationship that she feels really good about, but she's still really worried about people knowing about it and talking about it. There's that moment where people from her work know about it, and she gets this inkling, like, they've been talking about it for a while, and she's worried about that. She's worried about going and telling her friends so they hear it from her first. Mm-hmm. Like, she's putting everyone before herself. And in this moment, like, after, leaving a marriage that was really bad for her, and finally being with someone who seems to be quite a positive influence in her life in this way, she's still thinking about other people in her life first. And it's a little tragic, yeah, I think that's where I'm at, like, this could have been like a moment where she's, finally putting herself first, but, your personality traits kind of like take precedence still, even in this new situation. And, there's leading with empathy might actually be harmful for her in this way, at least for her own peace of mind or mental health. I don't know.
Her friend, is it Anna, brings that up, actually, because she asks about that dishwasher that she's going to buy her mom. And it's interesting because her mom is so hard on her, but not hard on her siblings. But Margaret's the only one who seems to take care of her. Mm-hmm. And she's buying her mom this dishwasher, and her friend's like, but she doesn't even know that it's coming from you, that your siblings haven't chipped in. And she's kind of like, it doesn't matter. And she's like, but it does matter, because your siblings won't say it. They're not going to tell your mom that they chipped in, and your mom's forever going to think. And she has this whole moment with, like, why do I need to, like, be the hero of the dishwasher? Like, how does that make things better? And Anna is so, she has a very strong opinion on this, that her friend should take ownership of it.
Yeah.
It's the dishwasher. Her life is the dishwasher. She's always putting other people before her. It is tragic, but...
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Nat, anything else, or should we... I guess we don't have a next book because we're going on.
I think we hit all of the notes that I wanted to talk about, and I think... Okay, so this is the final episode of this season. So as always, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to take a few weeks off, and then we'll kind of post about what we're reading next, and we'll keep you posted on social with our next pick. But if you have anything that you'd like us to, read next, let us know.
Yes, we love suggestions. So please chime in with anything you want us to read, anything you want us to talk about. Love to hear it.
Yeah. And all right. Well, see you in a few weeks.
Yeah. See you at book club.
Bye.